Welcome to the podcast. We're so glad you joined us here today. We really have, I think it's a really solid episode with a lot of practical stuff for parents.
Yeah.
This is a question we get asked all the time. Well,
absolutely.
Often, not all the time.
Yes. Well, I think it's
often.
a common experience. And as you'll hear, the experience of children telling lies or making up stories is not, it does, and as we say in the podcast, it does not mean that your child is going to become a serial killer or a con man or whatever.
Right.
But this is the reason that it's, I think, an important thing is because it's a developmental stage that many children, I don't want to say all, many children do go through.
Most children,
Yeah.
At least most in our household. And we share some funny stories as well as some great tips for overcoming this and creating a new culture within your household.
And as you'll hear, Jordan is just an awesome lady. I had dinner with her. We had so much fun hanging out. And I was like, you have got to be on our podcast.
Yeah. I'm so excited. And I know the organization does great things. So we'll talk about that as well. But if you haven't kind of checked us out on social media, we had this fun video that we did. We had you
can see I'm kind of tan here because we were away on vacation with my Doman family reunion. And so we have a generational video with a lot of people in it.
Yeah. So it's kind of fun.
And you know what struck me actually about that video is that it's starts with my parents and then my siblings and then my in-laws and then all of the grandchildren and then the great-grandchildren, is that if what my parents are doing in that video is the goal of every one of the young men in that video and every one of the young women, how powerful is that?
Yeah.
How powerful is that? How powerful is if every one of those grandkids becomes my father, 70 years from now.
Right.
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Because really at the end of the day, and it's not just about the number, because we know there's but it's that they were open to what God's plan was.
Right.
And he allowed God to bless and be fruitful in their lives.
Through
and they
the generations.
And they fell in love, but then they chose to stay in love. They chose love.
Yeah.
And it had a very fruitful and powerful impact. Great little image. Obviously, you can see.
So go check it out on Instagram.
Yeah.
You have to see it on Instagram.
And just on that note, we're recording this both as a podcast and on YouTube. If you're interested, we'd love to have you go to YouTube, check out our social media channel. We're really trying to do more to offer as a service to you. So if it's interesting, if it's fun, please check us out. We'll make sure those are in our links here below on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
And so now let's get into our interview with Jordan, and stick around to the end. We're going to give you some key takeaways and a couple discussion questions after the interview is over. Well, welcome, Jordan, to our podcast. I'm so excited to have you on today.
Yes, thanks for coming.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you, Mike and Alicia. I love the Messy Family Project, so this is going to be great.
So I just want to say, first of all, a little shout out to Paradisius Dei for bringing Jordan and I together.
Yes.
We were together recording for their new program, She Shall Be Called Woman, that's coming out in the fall. And we're both presenters on there. And we went out to dinner together before our presentation. And I was just like, I could hang out with this lady all day. We got to have her on the podcast. So
that's exactly what I told my husband when I got home. I'm like, I feel like Alicia and I could have had one of those all-nighters where we just stay up and burn the midnight oil
100%.
talking and downloading.
That's right. We'll have to do Messy Family Project, Families of Character together.
Yes.
Something. So just by way for our listeners, by way of introduction, Jordan are you the executive director of Families of Character?
I am.
Okay, so we're going to talk about that more in a second, but on a personal level, she's awesome. So let's start out with that. But she has three kids living at home. She is a licensed clinical social worker working and counseling and coaching parents for 20 years. And so that was like the first level. When I heard that, I was like, ooh, I want to talk to this lady. I want to find out more. And I know you guys do a lot of coaching, but also I feel like this is what you do in working with families. I feel like it is so needed today because what in the past was called values or family values is all muddy. The waters are so muddied today. And I feel like, and I'm obviously very grateful for our faith, for our Catholic faith that gives us that direction. But even within our faith, I feel like things have to get really practical for families. Yes. So can you just tell us real quick, how did you get into this work with families that is so, so very important?
Yes. Well, that's a great question. It's kind of a long story, but I was doing an internship. I was getting a master's in theology at the Augustine Institute here in Denver. And part of the program was you had to intern with an apostolate. I had 3 kids in different schools and was working full-time my private practice. And I thought I better just find somebody that's like next door to one of the classrooms where I study. And I knocked on the door at Families of Character. Steve Markle answered and I said, do you do internships? And he says, never have. What would it take? And I said, not sure, but we could figure it out. And so it just worked out. It was like free help for him and it was convenient for me. And what was born out of that was just this awesome mentorship. And he began mentoring me. And I would sit with him for a couple hours a week and listen to him talk with parents who were calling in about problems that they were having in their marriage and with their parenting. And
so he was like a coach. He was coaching parents, just people who would call in. That's what he did.
He founded the Families of Character.
Yes. Yes. Mm-hmm. And so he started talking about his own story and his own struggle of his kids, just kind of being a mess when they were adults and how frustrating that was to him and how he met with his spiritual advisor and was just racking his brain. Father, what did I do wrong? I tried everything. I've sent him to all the Catholic schools and really developed them, in all these ways to know their faith. And Father just cut him off and he said, Steve, stop talking to your kids about their faith. They know their faith better than you, and you're a daily communicant. He said, you forgot to develop their will. You developed their intellect, but you didn't develop their will. And he said, Father, you're so right. And he said, so I got to now go back and try to parent these older kids and help develop them in virtue. So things like just getting up at the same time every day and having a morning routine, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the evolution of Families of Character is he started coaching other parents in small groups to work on one virtue a month, kind of focus in on being more orderly and organized. And these couples would meet together, study this, and then go home and implement it with their family. And then they'd meet back up as a group in a month. Well, Catholics, we love social groups, so we'll show up every month.
Because there is no party like a Catholic party, okay?
Exactly. But sometimes they would come back together and be like tail between their legs. We didn't actually really do anything to implement this with our kids. And that's where I was like, this is my in, because I love to break down kind of the bigger, parts of a family problem into very practical bite-sized steps. So meeting a person where they are in their struggle and then giving them that first step to get a win. Yes. And then lead them down the path of, okay, this is something that you can really get going in your family, a weekly family huddle, and kind of getting this moving in a very practical, natural way at home. So I ended up discerning out of the grad program and going full-time with Families of Character. And in a beautiful moment in adoration, I said, Lord, I don't know what to do with my private practice, and I'm here just for one answer to this question. And I opened up my eyes, and my eyes went straight to this vase of flowers on the altar, and the flowers were completely brown, dead, and crusty. And the message I got was, it is dead. And my
oh my, wow, that's a little dramatic.
I tested God, because this is what I do. I said, oh, right. I'm sure all the flowers are dead in here. Like the flower person's probably on vacation and everything's dead. And I look around and all the other flowers are just beautiful and vibrant and fresh. And like, okay, there's my sign.
Okay.
So I knew it was time to close the doors on my mental health practice and then just trust in the Lord's, divine timing to step into this role of Families of Character. So there you go.
How long have you been there now in this role?
So I have been the executive director for 18 months now. So since the beginning of 2023. Beautiful.
Wow. That's
and then
beautiful.
how long have you been with them?
Intern.
I forget. I'm bad at timelines, but I think it's been like...
COVID makes everything weird. Everything's like it could have been 10 years ago. It could have been 3 years ago.
I'm pretty sure it's like the 4-year mark.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, well, that is awesome.
And I should have said this in the beginning. I talked to Steve maybe 2 years ago and loved the way that Families of Character laid out this virtue training and formation for kids. And I thought messy families need more order, need more of this virtue formation. So that was beautiful, really beautiful.
Yeah. So, but I love that what you said though about even like that mental health practice, forming character in families. I feel like that's how you get to the place where, please God, more practice will be able to close their doors because people will be healthier because they have learned what they need to learn to be successful, functioning adults within their families. There are so many wounds that we all have from our families and the lack of formation or choices that we made because we didn't have that formation within our families.
Yeah, there's wounds and there's lack of formation. That's right.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, and I just wonder, I think that formation for families is so very important. I mean, right?
It is. You know, we just are focusing, we don't even realize it, but we're focused on the wrong things.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know,
like what? Like, can you go into that a little bit more? Because I'm sure people listening are be like, the wrong things. Maybe I'm focused on the wrong things. What am I focusing on that's wrong?
One of the things we talk about, and this happened to my husband and I, Josh and I, is just this idea that we're sending our kids to Catholic schools, and we really believe that like this is the thing to do, and this is what we do as Catholics. We send our kids to Catholic schools, and the formation is great. We love the schools. We love what they're getting there.
Right.
What we failed to do is to integrate that faith formation back in our home. So I joke at how Josh and I, when we had 3 kids in Catholic school, the type of parents we was we provided 3 hots and a cot. It's like prison talk. Okay? 3 hot meals and a cot to sleep on. And then we'd throw them in the shower at night and then do it all over again.
Rinse, repeat. Yeah. Got it.
Yeah. And so we didn't even realize, intellectually that we were outsourcing the development of our kids' faith and morals to the school.
That's right.
Because we were just in this routine of making sure they got their homework done and then moving on to make dinner and clean up and then get ready for bed and go to sports practice and then send them again. And so there weren't really any discussions about focusing on one particular virtue to work on, like, hey, let's work on respect and not talking back, or, not interrupting each other when we're having conversations as a family. So there was none of that. It was like, and we just kept doing this for years until COVID happened and we were all home. And then it was like, wait, what just happened here? And now we don't have the faith formation like that we're dropping them off at. And so how do we integrate that at home, but do it in a natural way so it's not off-putting to our kids where they're like, oh, they're trying to do that Catholic teaching thing,
Yes, exactly.
And when you're thinking about formation, because this is so at the heart of people who are listening, they're parents who have a great desire
to be great parents.
But there are, even in their own formation, there's things lacking, or they just feel intimidated. Something that is a perennial problem for parents may not be the biggest issue, but it definitely feels like it sometimes.
It comes up.
Because we get parents asking us all the time, what do you do when your kids are lying? And I'm investing in technology that actually is a lie detector for parents to use at home. But barring that, I know
that's our next passive income.
That's right. That'll be a future Messy Family product line that we'll work on. But I know this is a topic that you talk about, that you invest in, and really comes very much at the heart of kind of virtue formation, right?
Yes.
What would you say to a parent who is just struggling, right? They're like, I think my kids are lying, or I know my kids are lying. Mm-hmm. How do we deal with that? What's your kind of first blush looking at this topic and dealing with kind of the honesty incentive rule that you've kind of developed?
Yes, great question. First of all, just want to validate that it's like one of the most offensive things for us as parents, right? When our kids deceive us, it's so feels so personal. And then there's kind of a disgust for your child, but then immediately a disgust for yourself, because you're thinking like, who are they but a reflection of my leadership? Like,
right.
Ooh, this does not feel good. You know, I'm not looking at them kindly. And then I'm also like looking at myself in the mirror when I see them lying and going, what have I done wrong that they would do something like this, you know, commit a sin like this. And so it's natural, though, I want to say, for kids to lie. It's actually a natural part of their development, and actually honesty and integrity are learned behaviors. So I think it's so important to just talk about kind of the 3 stages of children lying.
So you mean to say that if your child lies to you, they will not go and become a con artist or an axe murderer? Is that what you're trying to tell the parents listening?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. Okay.
That's
good.
right. There's a spectrum of lying, let's just say. So 99.9% of children are not going to be, you know, serial killers and total sociopaths. So that's the good news.
All right.
Yes.
All right.
I first want to say, expect your children to lie, and that this is part of their development. And it's more about how you respond to their lying than the lying itself.
Beautiful.
So Victoria Talwal and Kang Lee did this study, and it's called Social and Cognitive Correlates of Children's Lying Behavior. And so they identified 3 stages in children's lying. And stage 1 is kids lying around the age of 2 or 3 years old. And this type of lying revolves all around just denying their misbehavior, right?
Right.
They think that if they say they didn't do it, then their parents won't be mad, and then somehow their behavior will be magically erased.
Yes. Right.
And so this is the 2. And actually there's studies that show that young kids lie, 2-year-olds lie on average. What is it? Let me see here. Every hour. Every hour, 2-year-olds are lying.
And sometimes their lying is truly laughable. You know, when they accuse like the infant of like, oh, they must have gotten up and spilled the milk, and you're like,
they can't walk.
It's like the child you are accusing can't even walk. So I think you're not telling me the truth.
Yes, but it's natural. And then around like age 4, children begin to really kind of imagine how someone else might think. So their thinking becomes a little bit more sophisticated, and their lies become more believable, because what they do is they take into account what the listener, what you, the parent, does or doesn't know. And they know the difference between lying and telling the truth, and they know that lying's bad, but this is a stage where they're also very interested in pleasing their parents. So they lie to cover up the misbehavior because they know it would be disappointing to the parent to be seen as doing something bad. And then around 7 or 8, so this is what, like 3rd grade or so. This is when they get like, you're going, whoa, this is crazy. Like, you are capable of deliberately deceiving me. And you can like make up a false story and then stick to it and sound sincere while you're doing it. This is where you're like, you believe your own lie, and you're down that road, and this is crazy. You're living in that world like it is truth.
Right. Yes, absolutely. So we also had a funny story of kids lying in our bathroom. Actually, even right now, if you were going to our bathroom and see one of our children who is now a teenager, when they were like 7 or 8, carved their name into
Not
the
just
door.
drew it, carved.
Like it's like I don't know what they had, like maybe a pencil that didn't work or something, and then they were like, "No, I didn't write on the door." And Micah's like,
That's actually your name on the door?
like, if you're gonna lie about something, like don't write your name on it.
Sorry.
But it's almost like you almost believe them because they do speak with such sincerity, and it can make you think, wait a minute, are they like disordered or something?
Right.
That they actually believe? Like they can be very, very good at that.
Convincing,
and that I think
yes.
kind of goes to what you were saying. That's why I think it's so shocking to parents and so hard, because you're like, I can't believe what a good liar they were.
Right.
So anyway, so what happens next then? What do you do?
Yeah.
As a parent?
Ultimately, in the younger years, you can correct that behavior in the toddlers, by saying,
Sure.
are you sure there's not another way to explain that? Or when they're blaming someone else for something, how about we tell that story in a way that doesn't include Joey as a character? What if you just talked about Susie? And so tell that story just from the perspective of Susie. What did Susie do in this situation? Then it kind of empowers them to just talk about themselves from kind of an I statement perspective instead of projecting blame onto someone else. But when they get older, into the 7, 8 and above, my personal belief, and there's no research behind this, don't look for this on the internet because it's nowhere. I actually Googled it before I got on, and I thought, let me see if I can find some facts behind this rule we made up in our house and how effective it is. We believe that if you condition your kids to call themselves out and tell on themselves long before you could find out, that encourages them to continue that behavior and to be honest. So we don't spend a lot of time at the Langdon house thinking of a list of consequences that would be fitting for each child. You guys have 10 kids. That's maddening to keep up with who's grounded and whose phone is on the top of the fridge.
100%. Yes.
And so instead, we focus our efforts on really trying to condition them to be motivated to tell the truth. And you're like, okay, Jordan, that sounds great. And how in the world do you do that?
Yes.
We're on the edge of our seats.
Okay.
Yes. So we have developed this rule that we call the honesty incentive rule. And that's just a name that my husband and I use between us, because that might just offer a little too much to our kids. They don't need to know what the name of the rule is. We just said one day, listen, guys, we've got a new rule to roll out. We just think that it's so important for us to take personal responsibility for what we do. This is like a life skill that you need for the workforce when you're a parent yourself.
Yes.
Just out and about in the world. It's just the right thing to do. That we actually are not going to give you any consequences if you do something wrong, but you come and tell us before we find out. And so this kind of gives them a challenge, like, okay, they're not saying I can't screw up. They're just saying that when I screw up, then I need to get quick about ratting myself out.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
what? Keep going. Sorry.
Well, and so we even have a little part in our kids' journal. It's called the Best Me I Can Be journal, that has a little story that gets kids in this thought process that, you know what? It is cool to call yourself out. Do you know how cool it is to rat yourself out and be like, I tripped my sister. It was so tempting. She was running by. She was close to my foot, and I just wanted to see her go down. Like, making it okay for them to just be honest about, like, here was my temptation, and I just, crazy me, I just gave into it, and the next thing you know, it all went wrong.
Yeah. Because what you're pointing out, and you kind of alluded to, is that when we punish, we are, it's a human nature to CYA, to cover up what we've done wrong. So by punishing them for lying, we're now making these topics that have to be hidden, and they might create even greater and more elaborate lies, and or enlist conspirators in the family to help them block this off. And then it becomes, I mean, and this isn't, we're not, again, your kids are not necessarily going to become serial killers over this, but by punishing, that's the problem, right? The punishing is creating this whole life outside of you, and the reflection that you can offer as a parent is now cut off because you haven't earned necessarily the trust. One of the things that I learned from a older dad here in Steubenville is he shared with me, he gives his kids the similar, but you do it more often. His kids are allowed to declare Jubilee. And meaning, like from the scripture, that there is a year of Jubilee. Well, he's like, you can have a Jubilee moment where you can come in and there are no consequences. You just have to ask for it. And then once you do that, there are no consequences, no punishments associated. Right. And I have to tell you, I have done that a handful of times necessarily with kids, because I could tell there was a weight, but I didn't know what it was, or I had an inkling of something, but I wasn't really clear. But when I opened that floodgate, or when I opened the door,
kind of like, do you have something to tell me? Like, is there something that you want to talk to us about?
It's beautiful when you can see that they want that. Their hearts
want to unburden themselves.
Yes. Yeah, that really is what it is. And at the heart of the Christian the Christian faith, right, of the gospel is about mercy, right? And but you're going even further in some ways, is that you're trying to incentivize them to live lives of integrity and live lives in some ways of reflection. Right. I mean, that's a kind of an interesting way to approach this as a parent. And you have older kids now, right? So you've seen this through the years. Yes. And is it borne fruit in their own taking ownership and accountability for their lives?
100%. Our oldest, who's 18 now, came to us one day and he closed the door to our bedroom and he's like, "Hey, Mom and Dad, that rule that, if we tell on ourselves, there's no consequences. Like, is that still a thing?" He was like, "Now I need you both to say yes." And we're like, "Yeah, like, come on, go for it. Like, what? Do we need to sit down?" We're like folding the clothes on the bed or whatever. And he kind of looked real serious. And it was like, okay, we need to sit down for this. And he had a big confession to make. And it was very, nerve-wracking for him to bring it up. But we knew in that moment, if we had not laid this foundation, there is no way he would have come forward and said, "I've got myself in this situation. Yeah. This thing happened with my peers and now I'm down this rabbit trail. And even though I've stopped this behavior, I needed to tell you that I was doing this behavior for a long time."
Yes.
Wow.
And it was it gave us such a soft place for him to, offer, for him to land, that it was like, "Yeah, buddy, let the monkey off your back. I'm so glad that you came forward and told us that this was going on for you. And no, you're not going to have any consequences." My goodness, he had already had so many natural consequences for his behavior, this choice that he had made. Yeah. Us punishing him would have just shut him down forever.
Well, because I feel like the role of giving consequences, like within the family, is because you want to show them there are consequences to your actions in the real world. Right. And so, and you're not experiencing them right now because you're a child, you're in our home, but we're going to provide those kind of artificial consequences so you can learn that. But when you have a teenager, a lot of times the mistakes that they make, there already are consequences in the real world, whether it's bad grades or they got a ticket from a police officer or they got in trouble with their sports team or whatever it is. So it's just like, and that's the time when I feel like parents need to just be like, yeah, like this is life, buddy. This is what happens to all of us. Yeah. It's not just you. I speed and I get a ticket. Welcome to the world of adulthood, Yes. And so parents, we don't need to necessarily provide those consequences at that moment, because what you need to do is give them support and say, okay, this is what you're going to do now. This is how you make restitution or pay the ticket or whatever it is, and move into that place of being a mentor, you know, and a guide to your children. And I feel like for, especially, we kind of slid into talking about teenagers here, but I just do want to say this, that I feel like the teenage years is where a lot of parents kind of get tripped up.
Yeah.
You know,
the freedom, that pesky free will thing. You know?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And like when they see their kids making mistakes, their temptation is really to just clamp down on them, or inadvertently, not that parents do this on purpose, but inadvertently shame their children, which just kind of breaks down that relationship.
Compounds the issue.
Could you give some good tips for parents who say, okay, if my kid came to me, I don't know how I would react. What am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do in that? What is a good place of reaction or tips you can give for parents for that?
First, I would say no consequence or no response on your end is emergent, right? You do not have to respond immediately to whatever the situation
You're
is.
allowed to think. You don't have to be like, boom, quick reaction. No, don't do that. That's usually a bad idea, right?
Good.
Yes. And actually, it puts kids a little bit on edge if you tell them, you know what? Appreciate you telling me this and coming forth with this, or now we found out this information. I'm going to need a little time before we decide how we're going to handle this. And then they're like, oh, no. You know what? Have you decided? Can't you just give me a consequence now? And it's like, oh, because they know a quick, like, take your phone for a day. Yeah. It'll be over. And then they can be back to doing what they're going to do. And it'll hurt less than kind of this. Let's just think about this. Let's just maybe draw this out a little bit. I need to sleep on it. Let me wait until your dad's home, you know, and then come back and have a conversation. Then you're not in fight or flight mode. They aren't in fight or flight mode. Everybody can have a rational conversation. Just say, and I always like to pitch it back to the kids. Well, if you were us, you know, how would you handle this?
Yeah.
You know, and if it's a firstborn child, or, you know, it's your first daughter, you have a son who's older than her, you're our first daughter. In some ways, you're kind of going like, we've never dealt with this before, so I don't know. What do you think? You know, they usually come up with harsher punishments.
I know.
We've experienced that
we totally
too.
experienced that.
And they'll be like public flogging, and
then
you're
I'm
like, okay,
we are the merciful. Like,
that's always a nice position to be in as a parent.
Yes,
the kids are very hard on themselves.
Yes, they are, and you make a great point. Like, do you want to be just beat down when you're already beaten down yourself, right? You know, you just screwed up, or you did something, you know, you were rude to your spouse. And then if they just, you know, went at it and got so upset with you and were like, you need to go to your room for, you know, a half an hour and think about how you just treated me downstairs. It'd be like, what? Like, first of all, you're removing our attachment to each other. You're, you know, breaking that bond. And then I have to go to my room and kind of like think about what I already know that was wrong and like live in this little shame bubble for a while. It just feels terrible. So if we wouldn't want that to happen to us, then we have to think about that with our kids too, that, you know what, I'll even give a big hug. You just screwed up. Wouldn't it be nice for someone to hug you and just go, we all screw up.
That's right.
And you know what? You're going to keep screwing up. And so we should expect this, right? I keep screwing up. A matter of fact, this morning, you know, I didn't take my grocery bags to the grocery store. And so I had to pay 10 cents for every stinking plastic bag. And that adds up. It's kind of a waste of money. I just screw, you know. So you just kind of normalize this, that mistakes are a learning opportunity. It's not something to be ashamed of, or we don't have to run off and hide about it. Yeah, the other thing, and I know if you're hearing this, but I actually kind of came to this realization when I was listening back to an episode that I did about the honesty incentive rule. And as a Catholic, I was thinking, I didn't even mean for this, but this is conditioning kids to do a natural examination of conscience.
That's right. That's right.
And to approach the sacrament of reconciliation with a spirit of like, oh yeah, let me run in there.
That's right. That's right.
Let me run to the confessional and just unload these burdens and ask for forgiveness.
Right.
And I think that almost one of the prime directives of parenting is to make it easy for our kids to do good. You know, we're talking about we're not controlling a robot or a computer. We're trying to move the locus of control, the power, the agency that they have from an external control to an internal control, you know? And early on, of course, we've got to keep our kids safe. We've got to treat them in good habits and form them in the way that they should go with eating and spiritual life and moral life and all that. But as they get into the early teens, really it's age of reason on, right? I mean, you talked about 7th and 8th grade is when it becomes more serious. Well, the church wisely has first communion and confession right then, you know, like it's like, okay, this is breathing right into what we as parents are seeing already, what the social science and psychological research is already seeing. Our kids need to unburden. They need to know who God is, and they need to take accountability in their life. So it's not an either or, because I think there's too many people who, you know, the whole idea of cheap grace, you know, that there's something that's like, okay, if the sacrifice on the cross was the solution, what was the problem? What was the sentence? What was the right? So it's not free, but it is freely given. It costs something. And for us as parents, though, to get our kids habitualized to owning their junk, the stuff, the mistakes, the failures, whatever it might be, so that they can say, and I want to be free so that I can do better later, right? As opposed to, I'm only loved when I'm doing right.
Right.
Or, you know, that I'm somehow earning my parents' love and mercy. Like that's foreign to a Christian, right? And we need to make sure that idea of shame and that idea of that you are junk or that you are a failure, you are unworthy.
You are a liar.
Right.
You know?
As well as that you don't have agency to change, that you do have the ability to grow and develop the habits. It's like both of those together. And it's like, you can't really get to the second formation part if the kids aren't eager to learn, because I have found that when they confess, when they bring something forward, when we have created the environment and they have brought it forward, those are the moments where our kids are most receptive to learning about how to not do this again. If we do it right, you know, if they screw up and we're just compounding it and we're adding more junk on top of their failure,
then they feel like weakness, I'll never make it. Forget it. Why even try? You know?
If we use what you're talking about, it's like you've already encouraged them to come forward. And now, again, when I'm thinking of a specific situation with one of our daughters who broke curfew and all that. And I had the wisdom, not from me, but from God, to say, we're going to talk about this later. And she became, to that conversation, super receptive.
Yes.
Because it had been weighing on her. And because I needed the space so I wasn't angry, I didn't flip out. Yes. I had clarity in that conversation, but she also had a conscience that was now receptive to the changes. And again, I didn't fully impose, but I said, well, how do we repair this? And we walked together.
Yeah.
But the essential role that we need as parents is kids to take that responsibility, that extreme ownership, as well as be receptive to our formation. Because if we're simply forming without receptivity, it's maybe water on a duck's back, right? I mean, I don't know. I really like what you're proposing here in so many ways.
You hit on something, just talking about a child's conscience. And I think as parents, as busy parents and messy families, you know, we can really get to the point where we are just flying past our kids, you know, going from one thing to another. If we stop and do some reflecting and observing of their bodies, of the way their faces are looking. This happened just the other day. My kids came home from the pool, and I was in the office recording a podcast, and I came out, and they're at the door right away, and they're 12 and 10, and they're like giving me a big hug, and then I go out to the car to get something. They follow me out to the car, and I'm like, okay, I'm observing something here. what is happening? Yep, my radar's going off. And they're smiling and they're like, Mom, oh, you're, just kind of like complimenting me in an awkward way. And I just turned around to him in the laundry room. I go, guys, do you have something that you need to tell me? And immediately my daughter says, nope. With a smile, my son said, yep. And I thought, and then I just looked at him and they looked at each other like, oh no, you said yes. And I said, no, now what? and my son could not take it another minute. He just said, we bought junk food at the pool. And I said, okay, yesterday we talked about while we were at the pool, the types of food that they sell in the vending machine. It's not healthy. We're trying to eat it healthier. What do you think happened? I don't know. We just walked by and there was these grandma's cookies and then there's this smart food popcorn. So we got one smart food popcorn and one grandma's cookies. And I said, well, how was it? How were the treats? How did they taste? And he said, the grandma's cookies, they were actually no good. And I go, oh. And that's about all I had to say because they were like, they were realizing the weight that they felt inside their body. Their conscience was gnawing at them. Yeah. And they thought, we've got to just confess this.
And actually, that's a great example for another question for those parents out there who are thinking, my kid would be like your daughter. Like, do you have something to tell me? Nope. And what do you do? What do parents do in that situation when you're like, I feel like they're lying, but I don't know. I have no proof that they're lying. What is the best way for them to proceed? Yeah.
Yes, that's a great question. It's a tough one. But I would say, okay, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt. You say you didn't do it. That's okay. Now, if for some reason later on something's bothering you and you want to come talk to me, I'm going to be available.
Right.
So you're kind of giving him that like, okay, I trust you because I want to trust you that you are always telling me the truth. Right. And I'm going to go away. But if something's gnawing at you, I just want you to know that this conversation is an open loop right now. And so you can come back if you decide, well, there's part of that I wanted to change, or it turns out there's another story that's bubbling up that I think I want to share with you. Just come on back. I'll be ready for that.
Because I remember at some point, I forget when it was, I think it actually was in my childhood, that I remember my mom saying to me, I think we were talking about one of my brothers and sisters, and my mom made the comment, she said that she had read or that she believed that one of the most painful experiences a child can go through is being accused of lying when they're telling the truth.
Oh, it's
by
awful.
Their parent. I mean, that's tough for any one of us, like in the world, right. But specifically when a child whose parent accuses them of lying, that's really hard. And so
that's
like
very hurtful
to err on the side of, I mean, would you agree like that if I have to choose between my kid getting away with a lie and me accusing a truthful child of telling the truth, it's better to just let them get away with the lie. I mean, is that what you're saying?
Yes. Mm-hmm. And if you implement this way of offering this soft landing place for them to change their mind and come tell you the truth,
right,
over the reactive, you know what, you're lying, I'm taking that away, go to your room, or you're grounded, you're not having that play date. If you switch out one discipline style for the other and try this on, which is really tough for parents. A lot of dads have a problem with this. They're like, no, because I'm going to lose my authority and I'm going to lose track of how many times they've lied, and this is going to get bad, and then the order's going to get messed up, and all of a sudden they're going to be running the show. And it's like, no, it's actually the opposite. Your kids respect you even more when you have a thoughtful conversation with them about their behavior.
Right. And I think we underestimate how powerful our relationship is with them. You know what I mean? I think a lot of parents don't realize that. Sorry, go ahead.
No. I just kind of going off of, I'll just speak for myself, and I know this is true for other dads as well. But there is this deep sense of justice that I feel like gets violated.
I was thinking respect,
and which then leads to, is my authority, is my leadership being respected, and all of that in the house, and nobody likes being lied to. And when your BS detector is going off, right? You really, you may not know, but you pretty confident, right?
Yes.
We have to, and I get tripped up in this for sure, or have particularly in the past more so, get tripped up in our objective isn't merely to control behavior. It's about forming hearts and minds. And so if we're as parents, we have to remember we're not playing a short game here. They aren't employees that are simply punching in, punching out. We're launching. Our goal is to launch them free, Christian, mature, virtuous adults. That's our objective. And my anger or my feelings of disrespect that they're giving me or whatever, it pales in comparison to the greater goal, the greater good of forming their hearts. Again, that's not saying to ignore. And if we have witnessed behavior can be addressed and have consequences appropriate to that. And we don't. Sometimes we also trip ourselves up by demanding that they take full ownership. I don't know if you got an opinion on this, but because I think that once we know we've seen a bad behavior, we may want that. Ideally, we want them to take full ownership, but maybe it's just, hey, you know what? You crossed the line here. I saw you do it. This is what we're going to do. We're not going to become emotionally, explosive. We're going to address the behavior and we're going to move on. Any reaction to situations like that where, because I feel like sometimes we force the question when we're just going to, again, force them to hide or obfuscate.
Yeah, it's really, there's no benefit of backing them into the corner and kind of peppering them and saying, so did you do this? Because then they're just going to, that's what you do when you feel painted in a corner. You just kind of like give the response the parent wants, because that'll shut them up.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So you're not gaining any ground, and you're right. It's definitely the long game. This honesty incentive rule is like playing the long game, but it's so worth it because it deters lying. It helps develop their character and it builds trust. And when your kids are little, if you start this when they're very young, when they come to you 5, 10, 15 years later with much bigger problems, that foundation is going to be set and they're going to feel safe to come to you and be honest and have a loving, merciful conversation around it. I think the other thing too that you talk about is just modeling, right? As parents, if we work to own our own behavior, a lot of parents don't do this.
I know.
Right? It's like, I don't have to apologize to my kids. If I screw up, well, oh well, they're just going to have to accept that. And it's like, no, if you can constantly be giving them that language because you're owning your own stuff and saying, guys, I just blew off the meal plan all last week. I was working late. I didn't sit down on Sunday and I'm sorry. We're scrambling. I usually do that and I didn't, and I can tell it's affecting you and I apologize and I hope you can forgive me. They're like hugs and like, Mom, of course I forgive you.
Oh, they're so forgiving. Yeah.
That is really humbling though.
Yes.
You know what? I actually had a situation with my son just recently. We had promised to take care of this, our neighbor's cat, and he was actually supposed to go over every day and take care of this cat. And it was like a week into it. And he and I, and he's 13. We looked at each other. We were both like, the cat. Oh no. And so he went over, and he went over a bunch of times. But when they came back,
we did not kill the cat.
Even though the cat is still alive. The cat is fine. Yes. Cat's totally alive. But when our neighbors came back, we had agreed on $60. I was texting the mom. We had agreed $60 from take care of the cat. And I said, well, you know what? He actually forgot a bunch of times. So why don't you only pay him $30?
Yes.
And I told my son, I said, this is what I said to them. And he goes, why did you do that? And I said, because I couldn't lie to them. If they had paid us $60, that would have been saying, we are saying by our actions, we did what we were asked to do. And guess what?
Right.
We didn't. You didn't. And I said we because, I do feel like I needed to take some responsibility too, but it really was his responsibility, of course. But for him to for me, and you know why I told him too, is because I couldn't live with myself,
exactly, because your conscience was bothering you.
Right.
Yes.
And those kinds of lessons for our kids are so important because it is so tempting to lie as an adult. And even just, it's not because of the money, but it was because of the embarrassment of, we didn't do what we said we would do. And this is like my friend, And like, I felt like such a jerk. And then I was totally stressed out about the cat. And then she did text me, say, oh yeah, we saw the cat. It's the cat's mine. And I was like, oh, thank God. But those kinds of things I do think are really, really important that we model.
Yeah.
And explain to our kids why we did that. Anyway, before we wrap up, I just wanted for you to explain what it is that you do in case families who are listening are like, we want more families of character.
Because we could talk about both lying and all these other topics. We had talked about more, but maybe we'll stay there for a future conversation.
Teamwork, there's your phone technology, all of that. But can you just tell people, why should they go to your website? What is it you guys do and all of that?
Absolutely. Well, we know that your family is the most important team you'll ever be a part of. And that our job as parents are to get our spouse and our kids to heaven. And so what a better way to do that than just to embrace your family as like the most awesome, amazing team, and you and your spouse being the best coaches you can to prepare these players to go out there and play the game of life with honesty, integrity, responsibility, respect, orderliness, and organization. And so at Families of Character, what we do is we coach parents to really be those awesome coaches that their kids need. We are supposed to be the primary educators of our kids in faith and morals. And I always would think, what does that mean? And people say this and you hear it at Catholic talks. And I'm like, could somebody break that down for me? Am I the only one not getting it in the room? But really what it means is just like rallying together as a team and saying, your dad and I don't have this all figured out either. Let's all get together and work on one common goal for the next week, have a family huddle on Sunday, celebrate the progress we each made around this one goal, and then continue to do this week after week. So our family has had over 250 family huddles to this point.
Beautiful. Oh, that's great.
Every week we are rallying together to look at the calendar and then come up with a common goal so that everybody's on the same page on what's going on in the family over the next week, and we can all pitch in and help out. And then we're all growing in virtue because we're all going, we need to, eat healthier food, or we need to make sure that we're picking up after ourselves at dinner time, and then kind of nudge each other and be like, hey man, you got to step up. We're all doing this. Like, what about you? And all of this prepares them to be part of their own family when they leave us. Right. So that's what we do at Families of Character. We have what we call a Thriving Family Accelerator. It's a coaching course for parents, and we do it in very small groups to maintain the safety and just fun and personalization of the coaching. And so we train parents to get these weekly rhythms going in a very easy way, and then start integrating in, one or two little goals to work on over time. And I've got to tell you, the results are crazy. I get to see these people on the screen because it's over Zoom. And at the beginning, the first session or two, you'll see this physical distance between the couple and kind of even almost a turning sideways away from each other because there's some division and tension, which is natural. This happens when you raise kids and they come into the picture. You really have to be so intentional about keeping your marriage connected that sometimes it just falls apart. And so by the end, they're like, can't keep their hands off each other. They're holding hands during the session. They're like lighting up. They're looking at each other, just adoring each other, and like back to dating each other once a week and going on quarterly dates. And like, it's just awesome to see him parenting as a united team. So that's our signature program, is the Thriving Family Accelerator. So new classes are opening up at the beginning of every month.
Oh, awesome.
That's so great.
Yeah, perfect.
And so where can they go to find out more, to listen to the podcast, find about the coaching programs? What's the website? Familiesofcharacter.com.
Now, it's not Family of Characters, although we are characters.
Yeah, some families have more characters than others, but this one is about having a family of character.
Of characters. Yeah, that's right. So families, plural, of character.com. And there's a shop there, tons of tools for kiddos and parents. And then also our coaching is there under the shop tab. And our podcast, The Families of Character Show, is on all podcast platforms and our YouTube channel as well. So.
Perfect.
That's awesome. Awesome. Perfect. Jordan, thank you so much for coming. It really was our pleasure to have you. And we'll definitely have to keep this conversation going because there's so much more I wanted to talk about.
Oh, yes. Thank you for having me. And I have to give a special shout out to Miss Ashley Banky. She is in Arizona. When I first started my podcast, she said, well, certainly you listen to the Messy Family Project, right? And I was like, do I need to? And she's like, yes. And so I told her I was being interviewed on the show, and she's like, nice. No way. My two favorite podcasts are converging. This is going to be amazing. So, hey, Ashley.
Awesome.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Thanks for having me, you guys. Keep doing what you're doing. You're blessing so many people. Your podcast goes out to 50,000 people every week. Yeah. This is so good. Just keep going. Keep blessing families and couples, and there can never be too many of us in this space. So I'm happy to collaborate with you. Yes.
Thank you, Jordan.
Yes.
All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the conversation with her, and we had other things, as we kind of alluded to. We had other things. I feel
like she could be an ongoing guest.
Well, yeah, we had so many topics we wanted to get to that we didn't get to, but that was really it was succinct and powerful, and I think thoughtful enough for us to be able to say this is what we want for our kids. We want to train them and steep them in truth telling. We want to make it easy for them to do the right thing.
Exactly.
And so here's some
just a couple of key takeaways that I wrote down after our interview is, first of all, is that training the will of your child is just as or even more important than training their intellect. That was something that really struck me, especially because so many people are so focused on training their kids to do well in school, do well in sports. Well, how about training their will so they're self-disciplined people? Also, just knowing most kids are going to lie at some point.
It's just natural developmental stage. It's okay.
But it's how you react to them that matters, which is something that is an ongoing theme for sure from Messy Family Project, is that to be a great parent, right? we got to start with us, right? And kind of going off of that there's different stages of lying. That a 3-year-old who's lying is different than a 7-year-old, and that's different than a 16-year-old. So that's something that requires a different response from us.
I really love the honesty incentive rule, like just creating a place where you are empowering and creating greater personal responsibility for kids. It's creating an environment where you're really, again, kind of making it easy for them to do good, but really developing that personal responsibility and ownership.
Yeah.
And when you find your child lying, allow yourself time to think about how to handle it. There's no need, and this is true in so many areas when we're trying to form our kids, there's no need to respond immediately as if it's an urgent emergency, right? Again, outside of it being, as opposed to actually being an emergency, but in general, take time.
Reacting is rarely a good thing to do.
That's right.
Parenting.
Take a time, take a breath, and say, okay, how am I going to respond to this? And then maybe chat with your spouse on that.
And then lastly, and this kind of goes to, again, hey, we got to change ourselves, is we have to slow down and take time to know our children and observe their behavior. So you can see, and I've definitely experienced this as a mom, where I'm like, there's something not right here. This child is not telling me the truth. Yeah. And you only can really do that if you really know your kid. And so we need to take that time to observe them. So some things for you to discuss with your spouse after hearing this is, I want you to think about, what is your reaction when your kids lie to you now? How do you react? How do you respond? What are the good parts and bad parts about how you are currently responding to children not telling the truth? And then think about, and kind of going a little bit deeper with that, how do you feel about that? How do you feel when your kids lie to you? Because I think sometimes, especially with dads, if dads feel really disrespected, they can have maybe a stronger reaction than is necessary. Or if moms feel like really betrayed, unnecessarily so, that can really not, that can kind of like...
It sets you off on the wrong foot. Right?
Exactly. That in a way that doesn't serve your child. So another thing to think about. And last, do you take time to observe your child?
Right.
Do you take time to actually observe their behavior? Would you know if something was going wrong. And maybe talk to your spouse about that. Maybe one of you has greater insight to one kid than the other. One of my sisters, I remember her saying this, she always felt like her husband had a good handle on these certain kids, and then she had a better handle on certain kids just because of personality types and things like that. So that's a good thing to actually talk about and intentionally recognize that you have to know both of them, but maybe one spouse has a better insight into a child than the other.
Right, because this is the end of the day, we are about forming the hearts and minds of our kids. We're trying to set them up for success for the rest of their lives. We're trying to put them up in a place where maybe when they're young, as we've talked about before, the idea of that we're simply protecting their innocence. In a way, we're always doing that, but really as they get into the early preteen and teen years, we're really forming them in Christian maturity. We're teaching them and forming them in virtue. And so as you see these different phases, these different plateaus, these different developmental stages, you're growing in your expectation for them, but with that expectation needs to come an empowerment that you're giving them the freedom, giving them the opportunities to grow and take that personal responsibility. So hope you did enjoy today's episode, and please take a look at the links we have both for Jordan and her organization, as well as some social media links for us and for more resources. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.
Family, we're taking a chance.